Moseying on into the department. Neil Wolin was nominated as Deputy Treasury Secretary by President Obama Monday, and Lyle Brainerd is Undersecretary of the Treasury for the International Affairs in an effort to help Treasury Secretary Geithner, who's been holding down the fort at the Treasury on his own. With a look at if they've got what it takes to help Geithner, I'm joined right now by Mark Bloomfield, the former Secretary of President Reagan's Transition Group on Tax Policy. Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be back.
Nothing like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid to put this in perspective, but I think you would agree that the absence of some top deputies has certainly made Treasury Secretary Geithner's job even more challenging over the past couple of months. Are the new nominees safe nominees or good nominees?
Well, I think the most important point is now there is some staff at Treasury. Whether or not there's any skeletons in their closet, who knows? But as I said, he needs help, and now he's got help. So that's an important point. Now, you got to understand, he wasn't here alone. He was involved. You got Larry Summers, the National Economic Council. You've got the Council of Economic Advisors. So unlike the days when I was involved, you've got a lot of folks running around. So he hasn't been alone. He's got other people running around, which causes potential conflicts, but at least he's got a good staff now, and he needs it.
What's the backstory, Mark, on what's going on between Lawrence Summers and Treasury Secretary Geithner? We're really not hearing an awful lot from Lawrence Summers. We saw one public appearance by Paul Volcker with the president while Geithner was overseas in Europe. Are they working cohesively?
They're working, and I hope they're working cohesively. I think the important point is that people is politics, is policy, and policy is people. There's a guy, the big enchilada, who's in charge, which is Obama. I think he's got the ability to coordinate all these people, but don't rule out Larry Summers. When they're negotiating the stimulus package, it was Larry Summers, I was going to say Secretary Summers, because he was Secretary of Treasury at one time. It was Larry Summers and his deputy who were doing a lot of the day-to-day negotiations on the stimulus package, whereas this Geithner was focusing on financial problems. So Larry Summers is still a big player. It's a question of who does what, and that's a little bit confusing to people on the outside.
Okay, so let's get specifically down to the details here on a couple of these candidates. Neil Wolin, first of all, here's somebody who worked as a president and CEO of Hartford Financial Services Group at one time. They, of course, qualified for TARP funds. I think it was about $3.4 billion. Is there a conflict of interest here, or does his past experience with the Clinton administration make him a viable candidate?
Well, I think the good thing is we've got a businessman in there. I mean, what we've got is a bunch of academics, which I'm not dumping on academia, but you've got a COO, and the deputy secretary is supposed to run the place. So that's a good point. Is there a conflict of interest? Gosh, I don't think so. With the spotlight on everybody today, I am sure that they'll find out whether or not he had an aunt as a political criminal or rapist somewhere in Africa, if need be. So I think they'll find all that out. I think the most important point is you got somebody who's run something, which is what you need at Treasury as Deputy Secretary.
And Brainerd, I mean, here's a case, ran a high post, a senior scholar at the Brookings Institute, also had a top role at MIT. When you look at what she's accomplished thus far in terms of her resume, a smart choice?
A good choice, especially as you know, part of our expertise is China, and one of our big economic challenges is how we deal with China. But let's go back to the situation. You've got Geithner, you've got a deputy secretary. Quite frankly, they don't have an assistant secretary for tax policy, which I think is devastating. They don't have an undersecretary for domestic finance. So there's still some gaps, but having said that, you got a second group of players out there, which is Summers' staff and Volcker's staff. So put that in the context, but yes, she's got some great expertise because she knows China.
So being where we are right now, I think we're now 65 days into this new administration, assuming that these three candidates, one of which is already in the post from the Bush administration, were confirmed and in their position, and they're able to fill some of these other roles over the next 25, 30 days. Are they starting to turn the corner?
Well, I think at least they've got an administration in place, and thank goodness now we've got some staff. But we got policy. People only execute policy. The big question, even with the best of people around, if you don't have the right policy, you get in trouble. But I think it's a great step forward. I think you've got some additional help here, and I think with the staff they have, we may disagree on whether the toxic acid or the stimulus works or not, but I think this is definitely a step forward.
All right, Mark Bloomfield, thank you very much. Great seeing you this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.